I should have known something was wrong the moment Captain Vrel accepted the human into our combat training program. Let me explain. My name is Thane, and I serve as the secondary combat instructor aboard the Galactic Defense Coalition station orbiting Kepler 4002b. For 16 cycles I have trained the finest warriors from across 47 species, Kralix berserkers, who could tear through steel plating with their bare claws, Yulthar shock troopers, whose electrical discharge could fry a battle mech's circuitry in seconds, even a Dromath heavy gunner whose carapace could withstand direct plasma fire, but a human. A soft-skinned, fragile, slow-healing primate from a backwater death world that only joined the Coalition 3 years ago? Ridiculous. You cannot be serious, Captain, I had said, my translator implant struggling to convey my disbelief. Humans have no natural armor, no venom glands, no regenerative capabilities. They break easily. Captain Vrel, a Thorgan with battle scars crisscrossing his exoskeleton, had simply clicked his mandibles in what passed for amusement among his kind. The human military specifically requested advanced combat certification for this one. Apparently she has an interesting service record. Interesting how? That is classified. I should have pressed harder. But orders are orders, and 3 days later she arrived. Her name was Lieutenant Maya Kowalski, and she looked exactly as unimpressive as I had expected. She stood maybe 1.7 meters tall, which was average for her species but tiny compared to most coalition forces. Her brown hair was tied back in the efficient manner human soldiers preferred. Her eyes, dark and alert, scanned the training facility with the kind of calm assessment that suggested either competence or foolishness. Given her species, I assumed the latter. She wore standard coalition light combat armor over her uniform, the kind we issued to scout units and support personnel. Not the heavy plating that real warriors required. Lieutenant Kowalski reporting for advanced combat certification, sir, she said, her voice steady and professional. Head Instructor Grath, the towering Kelvorian whose species had evolved from apex predators, looked down at her with barely concealed disdain. Grath stood nearly 3 meters tall, his scaled hide the color of wet stone, his eyes like chips of yellow ice. In one massive hand he held his regulation combat baton, a weapon he had used to discipline thousands of recruits across his career. A human, Grath rumbled, his voice like grinding boulders. Tell me, Lieutenant, what makes you think your kind belongs in advanced combat training? Your species has been part of the Coalition for barely 3 years. Your military contributions have been minimal. To her credit, Maya did not flinch. With respect, sir, my service record speaks for itself. Your service record says you are alive, Grath replied, circling her slowly. That is not the same as being capable. Tell me, how many bones have you broken in combat? 14, sir. Grath paused. 14? Yes, sir. 3 ribs, 1 clavicle, both wrists, 1 femur, both tibias, my jaw, and 3 fingers on my left hand. At separate times, not all at once. Several of the other recruits, members of species far more durable than humans, shifted uncomfortably. That much skeletal damage would have ended most military careers before they started. And you continued to serve? Grath asked, his tone suggesting he suspected her of lying. Yes, sir. Humans heal, we just do it slowly. Too slowly, Grath said flatly. I have reviewed your species' medical files. A broken bone takes 6 to 8 weeks to mend. A torn muscle, weeks more. A Kelvorian heals the same injury in days. A Thorgan in hours. He leaned down, bringing his massive face close to hers. You are made of glass, human. You do not belong here. Maya's expression did not change. Perhaps we should test that theory, sir. The training yard went quiet. Grath's eyes narrowed. What did you say? I said we should test whether I belong here, sir. Respectfully. Oh, this was going to be entertaining. I had seen Grath break recruits twice her size for less insubordination than that. The betting pool among the training staff would be on how quickly she washed out. I gave her 3 days, and that was being generous. Grathak straightened to his full height, and a slow, predatory smile spread across his face. Very well, Lieutenant. Since you are so eager, we will begin your evaluation immediately. Station form. Defensive posture. Maya moved to the center of the training mat, settling into a stance that looked surprisingly solid for someone so small. Her weight was balanced, her center of gravity low, her hands up and ready. Grath hefted his baton, a 2-meter staff made of reinforced durasteel alloy designed to withstand impacts that would shatter lesser materials. He had used that same baton to correct the form of Krelix warriors and knock sense into stubborn Yulthar recruits. The first test is simple, Grath announced, loud enough for all the recruits to hear. Endurance? You will maintain your defensive stance while I correct your posture. If you drop your guard, flinch, or fail to hold position, you fail. Yes, sir. Begin. Grath swung the baton in a controlled arc, striking Maya's shoulder guard with a sharp crack that echoed across the training yard. The force would have staggered most recruits, sent them stumbling back. Maya rocked slightly but held her position. Weak stance, Grath observed. Your feet are too close together. He struck again, this time targeting her left arm. Another solid hit. Maya grunted but adjusted her stance as instructed, widening her base. Better. But your guard is too high. Lower it. Strike. Her right thigh just above the knee joint. Hard enough that I heard the impact from where I stood. Maya lowered her guard slightly, maintaining perfect balance despite what had to be significant pain. Humans bruised easily, and those impacts would leave marks that would take days to fade. Grath began to circle, the baton whistling through the air in practice swings. Your species is weak. Fragile. Every warrior species in the coalition can endure more than you, hit harder than you, heal faster than you. What can humans possibly offer on a battlefield? Stubbornness, sir, Maya said, her voice slightly strained but clear. Grath laughed, a harsh sound like rocks tumbling down a mountain. Stubbornness is not a virtue when you break. He struck her again. And again. Shoulders, arms, ribs, thighs, each impact precise, controlled, designed to test endurance without causing permanent damage. But they were still brutal. I had seen Yulthar recruits quit after a dozen such strikes. Maya took 20 before Grath paused. Still standing, he observed, sounding almost surprised. Perhaps you are tougher than you look, human. Or perhaps you are simply too foolish to know when to quit. Both, sir. Probably. A ripple of nervous laughter went through the watching recruits. Even I felt my mandibles twitch in amusement. The human had spirit at least. Grath was not amused. Let us test the limits of that toughness. He increased the force of his strikes. Not enough to break bones through the armor, but close. The sharp crack of durasteel against composite plating rang out like gunshots. Maya's breathing grew labored, her face pale with pain, but she held her position. 30 strikes. 40. 50. This was getting absurd. By all accounts, she should have collapsed by now. Human pain tolerance was supposedly average by coalition standards, yet here she was, still standing, still maintaining form despite the fact that her armor had to be distributing impacts across bruised tissue and strained muscles. At 60 strikes, Grath changed tactics. He began targeting the same spots repeatedly, focusing on her left shoulder. Once, twice, 3 times in rapid succession. The kind of repetitive trauma that would break down even armored defenses through sheer accumulated force. Maya's left arm trembled but stayed up. Impressive. Grath admitted, breathing slightly harder now from the exertion. But endurance alone does not make a warrior. Eventually, everything breaks. He wound up for a full power strike, putting his entire massive frame behind the blow. The baton hit Maya's shoulder guard dead center, and snapped in half. The training yard went absolutely silent. Grath stood there, staring at the broken weapon in his hand. His baton, the one he had used for 15 years, the one that had disciplined thousands of recruits across dozens of species, snapped clean through like cheap plastic. Maya had not moved. She stood in perfect defensive stance, her eyes locked forward, her expression carefully neutral despite the fact that she had to be in absolute agony. Sir, she said quietly. Permission to speak? Grath looked from the broken baton to the human and back again. Granted. Maya's lips curved into the smallest, most dangerous smile I had ever seen. My turn? For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Grath stared at the human. The human stared back. And I, along with every other instructor and recruit in that training yard, tried to process what we had just witnessed. The baton. The legendary, unbreakable regulation durasteel baton that Grath had wielded for 15 years. Snapped. On a human. A species we had classified as fragile. Your turn? Grath repeated slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. You think you can strike me, human? Maya lowered her arms carefully, rolling her shoulders with visible discomfort. Not strike, sir. Spore. Properly. Unless the evaluation only goes one direction. The sheer audacity of it was breathtaking. Here stood a 1.7-meter tall primate who had just been beaten like a drum for 5 straight minutes, barely able to stand upright without trembling, and she was asking to fight back. Against a 3-meter tall apex predator who could crush her skull with one hand. It was either the bravest thing I had ever witnessed, or the stupidest. Grath glanced at the broken baton pieces in his hands, then tossed them aside with a clatter. You want to if that is part of the evaluation, sir? Yes. The evaluation is over, Lieutenant. You passed the endurance test. With respect, sir, endurance is not combat capability. You said yourself that stubbornness is not a virtue when you break. I have not broken. Maya's dark eyes were absolutely steady despite the pain she had to be feeling. So let me show you what humans can do when we are not just standing still. Oh, this was bad. This was very bad. I caught Captain Vrel's eye from across the yard. He was watching with intense interest, his mandibles clicking in that way that suggested he knew something we did not. Grath studied the human for a long moment. Then incredibly he smiled. Very well, Lieutenant. Hand to hand, no weapons. If you land one clean strike on me, you pass advanced certification immediately. If you cannot, you wash out and return to your unit. Agreed, sir. The other recruits immediately formed a wider circle around the mat. This was unprecedented. Grath never sparred with first-day recruits, especially not ones he had just finished beating into the ground. Maya moved to her corner of the mat and began stretching, slow and methodical. I noticed she was favoring her left side slightly. That shoulder had taken the worst of the punishment, and even through her armor, the tissue underneath had to be a mess of bruising and micro-trauma. This is insane, I muttered to Instructor Korvax, a Yulthar veteran standing next to me. He will kill her. Look at her stance, Korvax replied quietly. She is hurt but not defeated. There is something here we are not seeing. Grath removed his own armor plating, stripping down to his base uniform. His scaled hide rippled with dense muscle built over decades of combat training. He flexed his claws, each one capable of punching through light vehicle armor. Ready, human? Maya settled into a fighting stance, different from before. Lower, more mobile, weight on the balls of her feet. Ready, so begin. Grath moved with shocking speed for someone his size, closing the distance in 2 massive strides. His right hand swept down in a hammering blow that would have ended the match instantly. Maya was not there. She had slipped to the side, moving with a fluidity that seemed impossible for someone who had just endured such punishment. Grath's strike hit empty mat with a heavy thud. He spun, his tail whipping around at knee height, the technique that had swept countless opponents off their feet. Maya jumped it. Barely, her landing was slightly off balance, a wince crossing her face. But she was already moving again. Grath pressed the attack, using his superior reach and strength to drive her back. Massive fists crashed down like meteors, each one missed by centimeters. Maya ducked, weaved, sidestepped, reading his movements with a precision that suggested significant training. You are fast, Grath admitted, breathing slightly harder now. For prey, we prefer the term predator, sir, Maya replied, her voice tight with exertion. Just a different kind. She darted inside his guard, too close for him to use his reach advantage. Her fist snapped out in a sharp jab toward his midsection. Grath caught her arm effortlessly, his massive hand engulfing her entire forearm. Too slow, he lifted her off the ground like she weighed nothing and hurled her across the mat. Maya hit hard, rolling with the impact, coming up on one knee. She was breathing hard now, sweat coating her face, but her eyes were absolutely focused. Interesting, she said quietly. What is interesting, human? That you are outmatched, that you fight like every large species fights. Strength and reach. Overwhelming force. Maya stood slowly, settling back into her stance. You have never had to be creative. Grath's eyes narrowed. And you have, sir? My species did not evolve with claws or venom, or armored hides. We evolved to outsmart things that wanted to eat us. She smiled, and there was something sharp in that expression. We got very good at it. She came at him again, but this time her approach was different. Instead of trying to evade his attacks, she moved into them, letting his strikes glance off her armored sections while she worked angles he could not easily defend. A low kick to the back of his knee. Too quick to block, it did not hurt him, but it disrupted his balance slightly. A palm strike to his floating ribs, angled upward. Again, minimal damage through his thick hide, but it forced him to adjust his stance. A faint high, then a sweep low that nearly took his feet out from under him. She was not trying to hurt him. She was mapping him, learning his reactions, his timing, his defensive patterns. Grath realized it too. Clever girl. He changed tactics, becoming more defensive, making his movements less predictable. But Maya adapted instantly, her strategy shifting like water flowing around stone. I found myself leaning forward, watching with growing fascination. This was not supposed to be possible. Humans were not this good. Their reaction times were average by coalition standards. Their strength was below average. Their durability was bottom tier. But tactics? Adaptability? The ability to learn and counter in real time? Maybe we had been measuring the wrong things. Grath lunged forward with a double-handed strike that would have crushed her if it connected. Maya dropped flat to the mat, letting the attack pass over her, then kicked out hard at his forward ankle. This time, combined with his own forward momentum, it worked. Grath stumbled. Just slightly. Just enough. Maya was already moving, using his own massive body as a pivot point. She grabbed his arm, planted her foot against his thigh, and used leverage and momentum to swing herself up and around his guard. For one impossible moment she was airborne, rotating around his center of mass. And then her elbow, driven by every bit of momentum her small frame could generate, crashed into the side of Grath's jaw. It was not a powerful strike by Coalition standards. A Kralix warrior would have absorbed it without flinching. A Yulthar shock trooper would not have even felt it, but it was clean, undeniable. Perfect form, perfect placement, perfect execution. Grath's head snapped to the side. The training yard exploded into noise. Recruits from a dozen species shouting, clicking, buzzing their amazement. The human had done it. She had actually done it. Maya landed in a crouch, immediately rolling away and coming up in a defensive stance ready for retaliation. But Grath simply stood there, working his jaw slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he laughed. It started as a low rumble deep in his chest and built into a full booming sound that echoed across the entire facility. He laughed until tears streamed from his yellow eyes, until he had to bend over with the force of it. 15 years, he finally managed, wiping his eyes. 15 years, I have trained warriors, and a human. A tiny, fragile, supposedly weak human, lands a clean strike on me. Maya lowered her guard cautiously. Does that mean I pass, sir? Grath straightened, and his expression was no longer one of contempt. It was respect. Pure and simple. Lieutenant Kowalski, you do not just pass. Welcome to Advanced Combat Certification. He turned to address the entire training yard, his voice carrying to every corner. Let this be a lesson to all of you. Size is not everything. Strength is not everything. Natural weapons are not everything. He gestured to Maya. This human has something many of you lack. She has the will to endure pain that would break others, the intelligence to adapt when brute force fails, and the courage to challenge someone twice her size when wisdom would suggest retreat. He looked back at Maya. How long have you been training in hand-to-hand combat, Lieutenant? Since I was 6 years old, sir. 22 years. 22 years, Grath repeated. Most humans live, what, 80 to 90 years? You have dedicated a quarter of your expected lifespan to learning how to fight. He shook his head slowly. Your species may be physically weaker than most, but you compensate with dedication and technique. We have to, sir, Maya said quietly. Our world tried to kill us for millions of years. We learned that we do not have to be the strongest. We just have to be the smartest, the most stubborn, and willing to take more punishment than our opponent expects. I stepped forward, unable to contain my curiosity any longer. Lieutenant, your medical file said you broke 14 bones during your service, yet you continued fighting. How? Maya turned to me and her smile was tired, but genuine. Instructor Thane, right? You said earlier that a broken bone takes humans 6 to 8 weeks to heal. That is true. But there is something your medical database probably did not mention. She paused. Humans can fight with broken bones. We can operate on adrenaline and willpower long after our body should have shut down. We do not stop when we are hurt. We stop when we are dead. The yard went quiet again. We call it spite. Maya continued. When something hurts us, we get angry. When something tries to kill us, we refuse to die just to prove we can. When someone says we are too weak, we show them exactly how wrong they are. She looked at each of us in turn. That is what humans bring to the coalition. Not the strongest warriors, not the fastest healers, but the ones who will absolutely refuse to quit, no matter what. Captain Vrel stepped forward, his mandibles clicking in amusement. Now you understand why I approved her application, Grath. The human military has an entire division of soldiers like Lieutenant Kowalski. They call them persistent specialists, soldiers who can endure conditions that would break anyone else. How many? Grath asked. Approximately 200,000, with more in training. I did the math quickly. 200,000 humans trained to that level of stubborn, tactical, endurance-focused combat capability. It was not an army by coalition standards. Our fleets numbered in the millions, but wars were not always won by the biggest armies. Sometimes they were won by the ones who refused to lose. Grath walked over to Maya and extended one massive hand. Lieutenant, I apologize for underestimating your species. It will not happen again. Maya shook his hand, her small fingers barely wrapping around one of his claws. No apology necessary, sir. You tested me fairly. I just hope your baton was not expensive. That baton survived 15 years of training the most durable warriors in the Coalition, Grath replied. The fact that it broke on you is a compliment, not an insult. My armor thanks you for that assessment, sir. My shoulder is less appreciative. Report to medical after we finish here. That is an order. Yes, sir. As Maya limped toward the facility's edge to catch her breath, I found myself reevaluating everything I thought I knew about humans. They were not strong by our standards. They were not fast or durable or naturally armed, but they were stubborn, adaptable, willing to endure absolutely ridiculous amounts of punishment to achieve their objectives. And perhaps most importantly, they were learning. In just 3 years, they had studied Coalition tactics, absorbed our techniques, and were now applying them with a creativity born from millions of years of evolutionary pressure to think their way out of problems they could not punch their way through. Instructor Thane, Captain Vrel said, appearing at my side. I trust you no longer object to human participation in advanced training? I watched as Maya accepted congratulations from several recruits, including a Krelix berserker who looked at her with newfound respect. No, sir. I think we need more of them. Actually, they have lessons to teach us. Good, Vrel clicked. Because she is just the first. 10 more human candidates arrive next week. I felt my mandibles twitch into what probably resembled a smile. Then we had better order more batons. Something tells me we are going to need them. Vrel's laughter echoed across the training yard as we watched the recruits return to their exercises. And somewhere in the back of my mind I wondered what other surprises humanity had waiting for us. After all, if this was what just one human could do, what would 200,000 accomplish? I suspected we were about to find out. And the galaxy would never be quite the same again.